Following the passing of his land bill in 59 BC, and the creation of the Board of 20, and its subcommittee, the Board of 5, Caesar, who had forced his law upon an unwilling Senate, needed to ensure his Julian agrarian law would not be overturned by the administration that followed. Taking a page from his uncle, Gaius Marius's book, Caesar forced the Senate to swear an oath of obedience to the law. Metellus Celer, who was the brother of the Metellus Nepos who had tried, and failed, to legislate the recall of Pompeius Magnus from the east, in order to give him command of Rome in the aftermath of the Catilina conspiracy, swore he would take no such oath. Caesar's archenemy, Cato, also swore non-compliance to Caesar's oath of obedience. Caesar, then, used one of his tribunes of the plebs, possibly Clodius, to legislate the death penalty as punishment for recusing oneself from the oath. Every senator had to either take the oath, or refuse it. But they could not wiggle out of having to reveal their opinions by excusing themselves, pleading sick, or staying home. Now, with every senator on the record, Caesar could see who supported him, and who did not. After Caesar disqualified a candidate for tribune of the plebs based on his refusal to take the oath, Cato and Metellus Celer both capitulated. So many senators, fearing disqualification from public office, had taken the oath, that their refusal would have made little impact. And so, Metellus Celer and Cato each took the oath. Around this time, leading up to the consular elections, and Caesar's attempt to cherry-pick who could and could not campaign for Rome's offices, a man by the name of Lucius Vettius, gripping a dagger in his hand, ran into the Forum Romanum intending to kill both Caesar and Pompeius Magnus. He was immediately arrested by Caesar's lictors, and taken away for questioning. Later that day, in the Senate House, Lucius Vettius confessed he had been given the dagger by a clerk of Caesar's co-consul, Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, as part of a plot to assassinate Caesar and Pompeius. During the interrogation, Vettius named several members in this conspiracy. Besides Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, the conspirators included Aemilius Paulus, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, Marcus Junius Brutus, Gaius Scribonius Curio the Elder, and his son, Gaius Scribonius Curio the Younger, along with Lentulus Niger and Lentulus Crus. Aemilius Paulus and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, both of whom were named in the plot, were brothers, and the sons of the Marcus Aemilius Lepidus who had launched a rebellion against Rome the year following the dictator Sulla's death. And though the death of their father, who died in exile on the island of Sardinia, was not directly the fault of Pompeius Magnus, the defeat inflicted on him by Pompeius, forcing him to flee was, to the sons, worthy of revenge. Marcus Junius Brutus, whose father was Lepidus's partner in the rebellion of 77 BC, was the man who, after surrendering himself to Pompeius, and being permitted to await the Senate's sentence in the town of Regium Lepidi, was then executed on the orders of Pompeius. Marcus Junius Brutus was also of an age to crave retribution for the loss of his father's life. After decades of military power, wrested from dictators and senate alike, it suddenly looked as if Pompeius's chickens were coming home to roost. Gaius Scribonius Curio the Younger, whose father was consul the year following Lepidus and Brutus's rebellion, had been among the young men drawn to the character and charisma of Publius Clodius. We are told that the young Curio was, for a time, a part of Clodius's group of intimates, possibly taking part in many of Clodius's unsavory activities. Curio is also alleged to have been caught in an illicit sexual relationship with another young man who belonged to Clodius's group and, when his father banned Curio from seeing his boyfriend, Curio would wait until after dark, and then sneak his lover into his father's house through the roof. But, by the time Clodius transferred from patrician to plebeian, Curio's politics had drastically changed. Upon the creation of the triumvirate, Curio found himself one of the most vocal opponents of Caesar's authoritarian methods. Because Curio was not old enough to hold any public office, his outspokenness, driven simply by his innate loyalty to Rome's governmental foundations, earned him the respect of those who still believed in the Mos Maiorum. Curio was quickly hailed by the people as a true patriot. Curio's popularity was demonstrated by the resounding applause he received while attending the 59 BC Games of Apollo. In contrast, Pompeius was met with protests by the people, and Caesar was met with cool silence. After having been locked up for the night, Vettius was brought by Caesar to the rostra, where Caesar commanded him to repeat his accusations before a public assembly. Suddenly, the list of names Vettius had given only the day before, had changed. The name of Marcus Junius Brutus, who was the son of Caesar's mistress, was, curiously, missing from the list of the accused. Aemilius Paulus's name was also absent, as it was on record that he had been serving in Macedonia since before the beginning of Caesar's consulship. In their places, well-known opponents of Pompeius now conspicuously appeared. Lucius Licinius Lucullus, who had been stripped of his command against Mithridates by Pompeius, now topped the list along with a family member of the Domitius Aenobarbus whom Pompeius had defeated in Africa during the dictatorship of Sulla. Gaius Fannius, Gaius Piso, Marcus Laterensis, who were likely part of Rome's conservative party, and opposed to Pompeius's growing power, also popped up, right alongside the name of Cicero. The members of this cabal, who only the day before represented enemies of Caesar, were now essentially the enemies of Pompeius. Following his statement before the public assembly, Lucius Vettius was locked up again. By morning, he was dead. Witnesses reported that Vettius's corpse looked as if it had been throttled. Following the death of Vettius, the matter was dropped. Caesar, who, as consul, was in charge of public affairs, investigated no further. There are many theories surrounding the Vettius affair. Suetonius claims the entire thing was orchestrated by Caesar, who, having no legal path to ambush the rising popularity of Curio, a young man with no office, sought another means to silence him. In Suetonius's version, Caesar paid Vettius to draw Curio into a plot to assassinate Pompeius, just so that Curio could be caught and tried. For Caesar, this theater could serve two purposes. The first was the removal of a vocal opponent who, having no office, could not be politically manipulated into capitulation. The second was to drive a wedge between Pompeius Magnus and Cicero, the one man who could effect a reconciliation between Pompeius and the Boni, an outcome Caesar feared. Caesar's only real strength during his 59 BC consulship was his attachment to Rome's most powerful man, and even though Caesar had broken off his daughter's engagement to another man in order to arrange a binding political alliance with Pompeius, Caesar was still not confident. Once in Gaul, what was to stop the Boni from pressuring Pompeius into divorcing Julia and joining the ranks of the conservatives? Caesar could not afford to lose the support of Pompeius Magnus, and needed to cut off his route back to the conservatives. By accusing unknown Senate conservatives of murdering Vettius before he could reveal further information, Caesar created the narrative that Pompeius was under the threat of assassination by conservatives, even his old friend, Cicero. Caesar's ruthless political engineering was making it clear to Pompeius that fulfilling the terms of the triumvirate was his only way forward. For Pompeius, the horror of an assassination attempt would have been magnified by the fact that, as soon as he married Julia, publicly revealing his alliance with Caesar, his own base of support began withering away. For a man who had always carefully constructed his public image, this would have been more than disconcerting. Gaius Scribonius Curio, along with his son, were former partisans of Pompeius, yet now they were named in a plot to assassinate him, right alongside Lentulus Crus and Lentulus Niger, two other former supporters. Faustus and Fausta Sulla, the twin children of the dictator Sulla, whose affections Pompeius had stolen from Lucullus, were now against him, along with Gaius Memmius, the husband Pompeius had hand-picked for Fausta. Even Metellus Nepos, who had fought to give Pompeius sole control of the city, pulled away, along with his brother Metellus Sella. Asauricus, Publicola, Petrius, and many more who had once been Pompeius's avid advocates in the Senate, now openly criticized him. If Caesar, indeed, orchestrated the Vettius affair in order to isolate Pompeius from Cicero, then his timing was perfect. Cassius Dio, however, tells us that it was actually Cicero and Lucullus who sent Vettius, and that they had joined the conspiracy with Bibulus because of their vehement dislike of the political victories of Caesar and Pompeius. Plutarch has his own version of events, believing the Vettius affair was a ploy of the supporters of Pompeius Magnus to frame Lucius Licinius Lucullus, while other historians claim the Vettius affair was fabricated by Caesar and Pompeius as a way to threaten the Boni. Even Clodius, who, in order to bring down Cicero, needed to separate him from Pompeius's protection, is credited, by some, with manipulating the Vettius affair. Whichever version, if any, is true, by the end of the Vettius affair, Cicero and Pompeius were severed from one another, allowing Clodius to finally go after his target. When Cicero went to Caesar's command tent to beg for help, Caesar is said to have offered Cicero a posting within his offices in Gaul. This would offer Cicero an honorable way to escape Rome, the thing Caesar wanted most. But Pompeius, although suddenly leery of Cicero's involvement in the alleged assassination plot, advised Cicero that only by staying in Rome could he hope to fight Clodius, while simultaneously promising Cicero that no harm would come to him. Caesar wanted to make sure Cicero could not reconcile Pompeius to the conservatives, and Pompeius, though he was no longer sure just how far he could trust his old friend, knew Cicero was his only link to the conservatives, should he need an escape. Both Pompeius and Caesar advised Cicero according to their own self-interest. In the end, Cicero, who trusted neither, fled to Thessalonica. Following Cicero's exile, and the demolition of his house, Clodius, whose power in Rome was absolute, accepted a hefty bribe to legislate for the freeing of Tigranes the Younger. This traitorous son of Tigranes the Great was one of Pompeius's political prisoners from the Mithridatic War. Clodius was required to represent the interests of the triumvirs, yet now he was using the plebeian tribunate, which Pompeius had restored during his 70 BC consulship with Crassus, against Pompeius, a member of the triumvirate. Pompeius decided it was time to check the reign of Clodius. Pompeius approached a tribune of the plebs elected to the 57 BC tribunate. Although this tribune of the plebs would not officially take office until December of the 58 BC year, Pompeius and he began laying the groundwork for the formal recall of Cicero from exile. When Clodius got wind of the plan to recall Cicero, he exposed his own assassination plot against Pompeius Magnus, with the news circulating quickly throughout the city. In August of the 58 BC year, only a few weeks after the tribunate elections, Pompeius Magnus walked into the Forum Romanum. One of Clodius's men, upon seeing Pompeius, drew a sword and approached the unarmed triumvir. Pompeius turned around and went back home. At this point, Clodius's street army surrounded Pompeius's house, and refused to leave. From August until the end of Clodius's term in November, Pompeius Magnus could not leave the safety of his home without the risk of being killed. But Pompeius already had a plan, and needed only to wait until his new tribune of the plebs took office in December. This tribune's name was Titus Annius Milo.